The one I thought we would do is about joining an existing team, because as I alluded to earlier, that was one that had been very popular with graduate student cohort. And as you said, there's over 200 of these. They will appeal to different people at different stages and so on, but you're guaranteed to find some that resonate with your current situation. And then it's nice to see what might be coming and then be prepared. And that has to do with this topic I started with about how experience is nice to have, makes you more confident, makes you better able to engage. But let's talk a little bit about joining an existing team. So, and I think this will support the idea you mentioned, Maria, where it might seem just like a simple thing, but there's actually a higher level of thinking that can go around it. So the first thing is that you are joining the team, and it's important that it's an existing team in this discussion. There could be a new team, and if there's a team that has not yet been constituted, there's a whole set of dynamics, psychological and others, about how the team comes together and what its mission is and how people settle into a role and all of that. So you could say that's actually a different topic, which is how to fashion a team. This one is just a little different, which is the team already exists and you are the newcomer. And again, we'll make it simple and assume that it's not a whole bunch of you and it's not a huge team where your presence wouldn't have an impact. It's, let's say, analogous to you're a rock and roll band and you have 3 people, now you're going to have 4. You have 4 and you're going to have 5, right? So it's a small group, let's say fewer than 10, where a lot of work happens in the workplace, just as it does in school and in life. But let's say you're joining an existing team. So the first thing is recognize that it's an existing team. So with an existing team, I submit the first thing you need to do is sort of get the lay of the land, read the room, get an assessment of what's going on. Because the fact that it's an existing team means it has a culture. It has a way of doing things. It has a way of making decisions. For example, when you decide things, and this is the subject of yet another article, how do you decide? How do you decide you're going to decide? But who makes the decision, right? Is there a team leader and that's how it works? Or do you vote and do you have to be unanimous and things like that? But there's a culture. There's a way that you meet. There's a way that topics are raised. There's communication styles. There's formality, informality, the intensity of the meeting, how much preparation is expected, all that kind of thing. So there's quite a bit to the culture. And if you're going to participate fully, then you need to plug in to that culture, which starts from understanding what the culture is. Now, of course, because you're joining, the culture may shift due to your engagement with the group. But initially, you're coming in and working with the existing model. Let's not assume you're just going to come in and sort of fix the team. That's not the scenario. So teams generally, and this is again another article, but it's a common pattern, go through what's called storming, forming, norming, and performing. It's sort of something to know. Now, here's a great example of the difference between that experience and not. If you know the phrase storming, forming, norming, performing, sometimes SFNP, if you know that, that's sort of like inside speak. It's business language. Now, not everybody uses it, but some people do. And as you enter the workforce and begin to work in your career, you'll notice that there are people who've been in business for a long time. And there's you. And so your culture, which is, valid for you and your cohort and everything, may be distinct from cultures that were in place decades before. And all those people are working together. So it's important to recognize that even if you don't use this phrase, there's a generation of people who probably do and are more familiar with it. And that's part of the education, the technical literacy, to know that these types of phrases are used. And this is one of them, storming, norming, forming, norming, performing. Okay, so in the storming, you run around trying to figure out what you're doing. Then you form your group. Then you're performing, you're norming, and you're performing better. So just the idea that groups have a sort of a time built in when they have to pull together. And you see this in all the movies of sports teams where they're all getting together and then all of a sudden they're all rowing well or playing baseball well, or they're all running well, or whatever they're doing. And they had to get there. They didn't start that way. So this team has already gone through that. It's important to recognize that there's going to be a trust that has been built up among the people there. Of course, there could also be ill will that is already, there could be history. And you're plugging into all of that. So that's my first comment, that recognize that there's all that culture, there's all that stuff, and you need to know, what all that is. Now,
The other thing, let me just add to that, Jeff, just an observation too. As a team member, if I can recognize where my team is in the process of any given project, whatever the topic is, and there's a good chance that I can help alleviate or at least recognize that there's some frustration going on because we're still stormy or we haven't fully formed. So being able to understand that process will also gives me an advantage, and in a way that I can help move the team forward potentially.
exactly. It's shorthand, right? If somebody
Yes.
says you're joining this group, you better watch out. They're still storming, right? Well, now you know what that means. And the shorthand is about efficiency, and it's about cultural acceptance and so on. So yeah, if you've been through that process and you join a team, you can say, looks like you guys are still storming, or I see you're already performing, and I recognize that I introduce change. And there's always a little bit of inertia, there's a little resistance to change, so you should always factor that in when you join an existing team, that you're going to have to go through that. So let's say this is analogous to one of the articles where I set up the fact, okay, this is what happens, and you're there. So what are the tools that you might use to kind of understand better what's going on? So one thing I do, and these are things that you might not think about immediately when you're joining a team, but I submit that they're interesting. One is to find out if the team wanted you, right? Did they ask for you? And that's actually even finer. Did they ask for anyone? Yes or no? And then among all the people who could have been asked to join, did they want you or not? So if they didn't want anybody, in fact, they said, don't give us anybody, well, that's important to know. And maybe they wanted somebody, but they didn't get who they wanted, they got you, which, again, is something to think about. So it's good to understand, right? Did they want anybody? Did they want more people than they got? Are you sort of a consolation prize? And so on. And even, were they given input into that decision, right? Did the manager come in and say, I'm giving you, Jeff, I'm giving you Maria? Or did they say, hey, how can I help? And the team said, we would like our team to expand. And in fact, we would like Maria. We don't want anybody else in particular, but she brings the skills, that we really want. So that's something you should, pause and consider. And then you should also think about whether you're an addition or a substitution. So the dynamics are a little different there. If you're added to the team, well, now everybody's going to adjust in a particular way to the fact that the load will be distributed. Not everybody wants their load distributed for them, right? Sometimes somebody's role is going to change because you've been introduced. And they might like that, they might not. So that's something that you need to recognize. Now, if you're doing a substitution, meaning somebody's leaving and you're being put in, well, that's again a different dynamic. Did they like the person? Possibly more than you, that's being, transferred somewhere else. Did they not like the person and are happy, and all of that type of thing. So that's another thing to think about. And then, what does sort of the baseline of the organization look like before you join, and I'm a big fan, another article about establishing baselines, establishing what are the conditions before you entered. So you want to understand that, because what does success look like? And I ask this many times. What does success look like with you joining this team? How will we know if you joining this team worked, right? You could say, well, I'm just joining the team. And somebody says, well, what's the team going to look like after you're there? What effect will you have? You'll say, well, I don't know what the team is doing. I don't know where they are. I don't know how to measure the success or failure of joining the team. So again, something to think about. Now, you might ask the person who assigned you. So this is back to coaching your manager. Hey, you're putting me on this team. How do you characterize the team now? What are the key performance indicators or other measures of the success of the team today? How do you define success in terms of my introduction into this team? How will we know? Because that may go into my annual evaluation and ultimately my career trajectory and things like that. So you want to do stuff like that. You want to know a little bit about the relationships of the people in the team. Obviously they've been on the team together, but is there chemistry between them that you need to know about? Maybe you know some people on the team, for better or worse. And you want to know how your entry is going to affect decision making and all this other culture. There may be things where it's you vote on decisions, and now you're a new vote, and so that changes the dynamics. And back to this whole idea of roles may now overlap or be ambiguous because you've entered. And again, a good manager will see that coming, right? They have the experience. They know putting somebody in means everybody has to kind of adjust, and they can look ahead to that. So those are some of the tools that I give you, so that you've reflected on this. You said, oh, I guess there is more to joining a team than I realized. Maybe I'll think ahead. Maybe this will help me inventory the teams I can ask to join, right? All this type of stuff about career development that can come from now having thought through this more carefully. I can ask, what could possibly go wrong, right? Maybe I want to join a highly effective team because I will learn how to be on a highly effective team, and that will make me highly effective. Maybe I want to be able to diagnose teams that have problems and I want to stay away. I may be asked, hey, we have a few different teams, just like different projects. Do you have a preference for the one you want to join? So those are the kinds of things that I hope they would bubble up those thoughts, and you would practice thinking about it. And so that may make you better able to navigate your career, accelerate you towards your goals, avoid pitfalls. Even if today you're not being asked to join any team. And that's the idea that when that situation comes about, you've already got this intellectual muscle memory about, hey, I'm not going to respond immediately. I know I have to assess where I'm going, and I have to ask some questions directly, or at least consider them, with my own resources before I respond, rather than just say, oh, sure, sounds like a great idea, joining that team.
Yeah, a lot of stuff in here that really we are not asked to consider before entering the workforce. And even while we're in the workforce, sometimes these kinds of steps can create stumbling blocks for us. If I have the opportunity to think it through beforehand, I may be able to avoid some of those stumbling blocks, which is really the purpose behind this collection. You talk about a couple of other things too, like some other strategies, thinking about developing expectations that are reasonable, like how long it will take me to fit in. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, well, and these are themes that I stress across the article. So one is, that you should have baselines, that you should define what success looks like, that you should have a way of establishing that, criteria for that, sometimes called key performance indicators, but they can just be a way that you're going to define success and failure. And a lot of the stuff I do is to talk about not only the, what can go right, but what can go wrong, right? To help you think through sort of the various sides of an issue. There's also, well, let me give you an example. Let's say you join a group and the group didn't really want you, and so on. So you don't have trust. They are initially not, let's say, they didn't want you, and maybe not you personally, but they didn't want anything. So what do? I mean, you're thrust into the situation. Well, one thing you can think about is if you contribute as much as you will be allowed to, if you do good work, over time, you will earn trust. People will see you as a contributor. This is the sort of just keep swimming strategy, right? You just do your job to the best of your ability, and you hope that over time you'll be there. You engage as much as you can. You recognize that there's a resistance to change, that there's a resistance to maybe some roles that have been shifted, and then hopefully you'll become a full member. But setting expectations, having a sort of an approach, looking before you leap, but then actually leaping, not being sort of paralyzed in indecision. Those are all dynamics that I think, again, experience makes you better at knowing to do those kinds of things. When you're first thrown into workplace situations, a lot of times you're just overwhelmed with all the new things, new kinds of people. Maybe you've never worked with people whose ages and experiences are so different, and their tenure at the organization is so much longer than yours, and these kinds of things, which in sort of a school situation, which is mostly what people have before they enter the workforce, everybody's sort of the same age, they've had the same body of experience, and they rise year after year after year, and then you're thrown out into the workplace. Whether you finished high school and are getting into the workplace now, or you go through college, or however you arrive at this point, you were always kind of a cohort. You were always together. Well, now you have people who may have been in the organization, for 20 years, and it's a new experience. They're sort of your colleague, sort of your peer, sort of not, and that kind of thing. So I think there are these patterns of setting expectation, good communication with your manager, measurement, quantifiable results where you can get it. Those types of things. Scenario, gaming out scenarios is a lot of what these articles have in common.